Hello there. Today we are interviewing, Matt and I are interviewing Demetri, an early investor with me in Tesla. I've referenced him a number of times in some of my chats with Dave Lee about a coworker of mine at Interactive Brokers. And it's interesting to chat with you, Demetri. And I always chat with you on text or whatever. We still stay in touch and talk about SpaceX and Tesla and Elon. And I think it'll be good for us to chat a little bit publicly and discuss kind of what got us interested early on. How's it going today, Dimitri?
Great, great. Nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Sure, sure. So first, I mean, we're recording this like on the eve of this kind of historic delivery number. I just tweeted a little while ago as we're recording this, basically, like I think like the whisper numbers must be pretty high now, and it's probably like 230 to 240,000 is sort of expected now, I feel like. And so anything below that, I feel like the stock could take a quick breather next week. And even if it's like 235,000, the stock could still kind of, that's my gut feeling. Maybe 240,000 or over, the stock just stays the same at this point. Is I'm wondering. Would you have any thoughts, Dimitri or Matt, on what do you think about the delivery numbers coming out?
Yeah, I think I'm around that area, and I think the run up may have been that we've had lately may have been in response to the numbers that are coming out. So who
Yeah.
knows? They may sell off on the news unless it really they hit 245, 250.
Yeah, I mean, we've been around this for 10 years, Dimitri. So you and I have seen this many times with Tesla.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
people get all excited about the quarter earnings, and we all build each other up. And then it's like a good number, but it still sells off because we've all built each other up, it seems like. And then it's like the quarters where it's like everyone's expecting the worst. And even if the print is bad, the stock goes up because we were all expecting bad stuff anyway, it seems like. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah. So I used to do pretty detailed, you know, delivery and production estimates, and then I realized I just wasn't as good as Troy Teslake at this. So, I kind of stopped trying to do a detailed build up. But and just in looking at the news and kind of the speculations around the China delivery numbers, it seems like those might be creeping up a little bit right now. So, I'm kind of expecting somewhere between 230 and 235. Wouldn't surprise me if they get up to maybe 240, but I would be surprised if it's significantly higher than that, or say
Yeah,
significantly lower than 225.
yeah,
Yeah, and in terms of the stock price reaction, like you can never really guess on these sorts of things. I mean, the
yeah,
fact that it fell after the Q2 print, which was such a blowout, was just so surprising, and it was flat to down leading into that as well. Whereas I think a lot of previous quarters you'd had kind of rising expectations and a rising stock price into the quarter. So
yeah,
hard to really pin it all together exactly how everything will come. But I do have to
yeah.
say, good delivery numbers. I think a really good earnings numbers coming out pretty soon, and we've got a lot of excitement around the full self-driving kind of beta program widening out. So I think there are a
Yeah.
number of potentially good catalysts out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because every quarter is going to be a historic quarter sequentially for several quarters now with these new factories coming online. It's not like I don't think we'll ever have a quarter for several quarters at least where it's like a decrease from the previous quarter. I have a feeling it's going to be just a sequential increase each quarter of a record delivery number for a while. So that's exciting times. And the gross margins are going to increase as operating leverage is going to be increased with the higher volumes, I think, and we'll see. It'll be exciting. So we'll see how much of that is already embedded in the stock price or not, I guess, over time. So let's go back to Dimitri. You and I, we've known each other for a while. When I first started Interactive Brokers, I remember you were like the main IT guy there. Everyone went to with issues, and you could solve issues like that. You were like the whiz of all IT at Interactive Brokers, and I got to know you pretty well early on. That was like 13 years ago, and then I guess when I transitioned to sales, we went to a new office building there, and you and I were kind of neighbors and started talking. Somehow, do you remember how it happened? How we sort of got interested in Tesla to begin with? Do you remember any of that? I'm trying to remember.
I knew of the Roadster, and saw a few of them driven
Hmm.
around the area, but I wasn't really didn't know much about them. And they brought the prototype, the Model S prototype, down to a
That's right.
department store, clothing department store, on Greenwich Avenue, and they rolled it in because it wasn't drivable.
That's
And
right.
I believe, I was trying to think back to see how it happened, and I believe you had told me that the car was down there, and we should go down there and take a look. So
Okay.
we went down and we saw the car, and they had 2 or 3 roadsters outside in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I got to drive one. So it was like a go-kart in the back
Yeah.
roads of Greenwich. Just,
Yeah.
it was like driving a go-kart. It was like really, really fast, and it
Yeah.
didn't make any noise, just the whining of the electric motor. But
Yeah.
yeah, and that sold us. I think then you put a deposit down about a week later, or I don't know.
A month later or something. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we both had our eyes down and getting a deposit down after that. But I remember I remember the moments we saw the actual Model S prototype. That was more impressionable to me at the time because you had like this futuristic car. This was like, what was it, 2011, I think, maybe, or
yeah,
2012? It was 2010 even, maybe. I don't know. It was like one of those years. And like the Model S back then looked essentially the same to the Model S's today before the refresh, with the nose cone being a little different, right?
yeah.
And but you can imagine back in 2011, that's like such a futuristic car to look at, right? And I think that was a huge impression with the touch screen, and you could sit in there and touch the touch screen and like see how it works, and it just felt like a big iPhone in a way, right?
Yeah, just the fact that you had that big screen, you could have internet access, and you can control the whole car with it. For me, being an IT guy, was just great. I was
Yeah,
one of the first guys that had like a cell phone that had a browser on it,
yeah,
keyboard. So I was really, looking forward to getting one, but it was just very expensive. I
yeah,
ordered the 60 kilowatt. They had a
yeah,
30, a 60, and
yeah,
75, whatever it was.
yeah.
And it was a stretch for me to pay. I think it was close to $80,000 for it
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. It was stretched for me too. I remember we just putting deposits down. I had to get like real, I didn't have enough money for the deposit. I had to really figure out a way to get money. It was like and if somehow I did some good sports betting on the Giant Super Bowl and had some extra cash from that to put on a deposit. But otherwise I wouldn't have been able to put on the deposit because that was, $5,000 and $80,000 car at the time. Like that was kind of insane on like an electric unproven technology sort of car.
yeah, everyone thought at the company, we always spoke about it, and they thought we were crazy that we ordered a
Yeah.
car that wasn't
Yeah.
coming out for a year or two, and
Yeah.
never driven it, trusted.
Yeah.
I always told people we should be able to get our money back if something happens. But, we put our trust
Yeah.
in Elon.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember at that time, Fisker was still like coming out with the Karma and stuff, and you brought that to my attention, and I was all worried. I was like, "What Fisker is this going to be?" It was like I felt like we were already investing in like Tesla options, right, at the time, and it was like maybe Fisker. It was like an over-the-counter stock, maybe even at the time. I can't remember if it was Nasdaq over the counter, but there was like a stock for Fisker at the time when the Karmas were first being delivered, and that. What did you think about those early Fiskers? You kind of follow those closely, right?
Yeah, I saw one. There was an EV club in Connecticut, the Westport EV Club, and I was a
Hmm.
member of, and someone had gotten delivery of one, and it had a solar panel on the roof.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was they had a hundred of them during Sandy or some storm in New Jersey, and
Hmm.
at some dock, and they all got washed out, destroyed
Oh,
because of the flood.
yeah.
And I think it went under because of that, because those were the first 2 or 300 that they were going to, start giving to customers.
Oh, geez.
And
Yeah.
also, I invested back then. You had mentioned it in the talking points about A123. It
Yeah.
was a MIT spun off company that had lithium ion batteries, cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
But and I had invested some money into
It was a
them.
stock. It was a public stock at the
Yeah,
time.
and it went under. I can't remember exactly why they had some bottlenecks on the production, or had some
Yeah.
fires, they had some issues producing the batteries
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a big deal with GM too, I know, and I think GM's EV plans didn't, there were not quite the volumes that I think A123 and probably GM themselves were expecting coming out of that. The there were just not as many, BEV and even like their Volt plug-in hybrid. Those sales they were kind of expecting them to, increase over time the way Teslas were, but they just didn't. They never really materialized. So I think that probably hurt A123 as well. But yeah, I was really bullish on A123 back then as well. Thankfully, I didn't invest, but they were a really promising company back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of QuantumScape today. Like, seems very promising, but I feel like it's going to be very hard. I don't know. It's like, A123. I didn't know them that well back then. I know Demetri, you had studied them, and I was still kind of very new and green on all this stuff. But it seems like Tesla is not the first big company to, produce batteries or design their own battery cells and such. And obviously Panasonic and LG and such have been doing it forever, but there's another American company that was trying to do it, at least, A123. So yeah, I mean, back in those early days, I think a big turning point for you and me, Dimitri, to kind of help get our conviction going was not just the fact that you and I could talk to each other. Like, every day we had a kind of our like water cooler talk for 5 or 10 minutes to talk about Tesla and keep each other kind of like interested, or, remind ourselves, how amazing the product is or what Elon's been doing. But we also discovered the Tesla Motor Club's forums. I think you might have discovered it first, or I don't remember, but maybe you told me about it and I got involved. That was like 2012 or 2011. That was a big resource of information for us, right?
Yeah, because they posted all, because Elon would speak at various places and it never televised. Someone would record it on a cell phone.
Yeah.
And the TMC guys would know, someone on there would know where he's speaking, or they'd grab the video and they post what he said, because it was hard to get news of what was going on.
Yeah, even back then, I remember on like Twitter, you would search Tesla and there'd be like nothing mentioned for like days or months on Tesla at the time. It was like hard to find a news article or anything, but TMC was like the place to be.
Yeah, definitely. It had, even on the car itself, it had, troubleshooting and all kinds of various forms. They had Connecticut and superchargers and stuff that they were building out. You'd find out, because there was no supercharge.info website early on. It was tough getting news, but I enjoyed our daily talks. We'd sort of, when the stock would drop $20 or $30, should we sell? Should we buy more?
Yeah.
It was a tough time. It was it took some big dips at various times.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember like my job in the sales role, I was very like under strict supervision with my personal trading. I was not allowed to trade during the business day. I mean, I guess I could, but I'd risk my job. And I knew of someone else in like our Canadian office in a sales role that had been fired recently for trading in the middle of the day a couple times or something. And that job was very valuable to me at the time. I mean, I'm thankful for it. It was like incredible, but I didn't want to risk my job by like selling in the middle of the day. So we'd be able to talk about things and calm each other down. And then, at night we'd think it over, or you'd be like, I'm going to sell this tonight, put my limit order in tonight. Because that's when you're allowed to put the orders in from, I was allowed to. It was like 2 hours after the market closed or 2 hours before the market opened. But then, our talks kind of helped us gain sight of the big picture and see the forest from the trees and not be so kind of emotionally entangled in that one day price movement from a Goldman Sachs downgrade or whatnot, So, those were key for our success, I think. And also for me, like not being allowed to really trade during the day, even if I wanted to, I stuck to that rule.
Yeah. When we bought the options, we bought those leaps. That was the way to go.
Yeah.
I forget how, who bought first, or we did it together, buying those 30 or 40 contracts at 45 strike. I think it was 40 or 45 was the key to making it and having the time horizon to be able to ride out all those dips that we had. But it was until we got the car, and we believed Elon that it was going to be the safest, longest range, fun to drive, and it looked good. I remember when I received my car, they were going to bring it to the house, in Connecticut, and he's like, I got a call from someone in New York, and they're like, it's going to be about a week before you get it, before we can deliver it. But we do have it in Queens, New York. So I
Of course,
said,
you're gonna go down there and get it.
yeah, they said we'll pay for the car service down, and you can drive it back. So I took advantage of it. I said, yeah, I can't wait. It was that weekend, and we went down on a Saturday, and it was just this warehouse with all these Model S's there, and we just signed the paperwork and we drove it home. We got on the highway, a bunch of people would like roll down their windows and say, "What kind of car is that?"
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was really nice.
Yeah, you were one of the first like 100 deliveries or something on the East Coast, I think, right? I mean, I got mine a couple weeks after you, I think, but I think you were one of the earlier deliveries. Do you know what number you were by any chance?
It was like 600 or something.
Okay,
600 VIN.
600 VIN, but on the East Coast, it was like one of the first ones. They
Yeah.
had been mostly in California initially in the first few months, and then they slowly migrated to the
Yeah, I
East
met
Coast.
someone near a neighbor of mine on the TMC forums that she had received she had a Roadster and she bought a Model S, and she got it delivered to her house about a week or two prior to when I got my car. And she was,
Yeah, I remember you telling me about her. Yeah.
yeah, she was one of the first ones to get
Yeah.
the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great time. It was a great car.
Yeah. In the snow, and we lived in the snow, and it was incredible even in the snow, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we lived in some blizzard conditions, and even that rear wheel drive only Tesla, I feel like that was even better than my Subaru WRX I had a few years before that, you know, in the snow. It was just amazing.
Yeah, it was a great car. Yeah, I kept it for 5-something years. I traded it in for my Model 3. So I had 124,000 miles.
Nice.
I drove it to Florida when they finished, because one of the first superchargers was in Delaware and in New Haven, New Haven, Connecticut. And once they built out and they had 5 superchargers along the East Coast, I was able to drive to Florida with it.
Yeah.
And I charged at my in-laws at 110 volts, plugged it in.
For like a weekend.
Yeah, we were there for a week, so
Yeah.
we were able to charge and then drive all the way back. Because back then, the 60 kilowatt only got like 210 miles.
Yeah.
And there was a stretch between South.
No, I think I got less. I don't know. Did I have you had I think you got upgraded to the 80 or 75, and I had the 60 because my 60 only went 150 miles at the time.
Oh, no,
Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to look back. But mine,
Yeah,
I don't think I had the
look
40.
back.
I think I had the 60, and I think it got 150
Because
miles max.
when I sold mine, it was only charging to like 190 miles.
Yeah, the long range at the time, I think only went like 200 or 210 miles. I think the early long range ones. Yeah. So I think you had the long range one, if I recall, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not.
Yeah, it was more than enough for our daily commute
Drive. Yeah.
Be able, even if you had to go back to work, you could still drive home and then drive back to work, because I was 20 or 30 miles away from work.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'd call me back or something would happen, there'd be an emergency, so it had plenty of range. There was this, I found out that range anxiety was just that, because that was talked about early on quite a bit, but it wasn't really anything to it unless you're going on a long trip, and there weren't many superchargers. If you're going 200 something miles and it was the middle of winter.
Yeah.
But we remember the Broder and the New York Times columnist that drove.
Yeah. Yeah.
That drove it around in the parking lot in
circles
in Milford. It was in Milford, yeah.
Yeah.
And he drove it around to get it to zero to show that they're not really
to have a sensational article written about it running out of batteries on a tow truck bed. And it's funny, he didn't suspect that Tesla and Elon could see from the internet connection, could see they actually drove it in circles. Yeah.
And
your Times editor like
similar.
Yeah.
All that news and all that articles written about that was actually good for Tesla.
Yeah.
In the long run.
Yeah. Those first fires.
Demetri, I'm curious, what was kind of the sequencing of, seeing the Model S the first time versus investing in stock, investing in Leaps, and then taking delivery? How did your kind of conviction to hold a pretty risky, call options, how did you get to that point, and did it change over time?
Well, we both loved the car, the way it looked and drove, and what we read from the forums and what Elon was saying, that it was going to be this one of the safest cars built. It's going to be one of the quickest, and it's going to be the quietest cars. And we just built up on that, and just talking about it and the excitement of getting the car and having that deposit down on the car really made a difference, because we had told everyone in the company, because I knew almost everybody in the company. There were like 300 people there, and everybody knew that I had put a deposit down on a Tesla. And everybody, most of the people thought I was a little bit nuts.
Yeah, everyone thought we were nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Was
we
this
always
2012?
told everyone. It was like 2012, 2013, 2011. Yeah, and we always tell everyone, buy the stock, buy the stock. We told everyone, and everyone was like, you're crazy. I'm not doing that. A few people did listen.
yeah, the options weren't that expensive at the
No.
time. Yeah,
They weren't.
the first 3 or 4
So
years.
you got those options before that first initial run up that happened in the first year or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't that. I just wish I had invested, 2 or 3 times as much. I just had the conviction to do it. But we put a considerable amount of money at the time in those leaps, and just getting the leaps was if we had bought because we started buying shorter term ones and gambling, and some of them we'd lose our money, because every time it would drop, we would buy some calls near the money, and it would never go up for 3 or 4 months or 6 months, and then you'd lose your investment there. But buying the leaps was the way to go at the time.
Yeah. And you did some selling of put options. I didn't do the selling of put options, but as time went on, you started selling calls or selling puts too to generate income. Is that right? You were kind of doing other stuff.
I didn't really put much more. I forget how much more money I invested in it, but I started writing puts. Like every time it dropped, I would write, out of the money puts, and I would, buy stock with it. And people are like, you're crazy, to do that. So that's the way I built up my position, and, tripled, quadrupled what I had at the time.
Yeah.
So I never wrote calls until COVID, and actually got, a few thousand shares taken away from me when I did write them. But I was always scared that, because it was always like a coiled spring. At any time, stock would go up 40, 50 bucks, whether it was 100 or 200 or 300. So I was always worried that I would lose my shares if I wrote these calls that were like 20 or 30, because we had all these some professional traders that were part of the sales group and other departments there at Interactive Brokers. It's like, you should be writing calls, and collecting premium. But I said, I don't want these shares to be taken away from me at that price, because I think the stock is going to, go to the moon, pretty much, Because people, when we doubled our money or then tripled our money and then quadrupled our money, people are like, you got to take some off the table.
Yeah.
And that was tough not to do. I think I took some of the options I did sell just to pay off for the car. I paid the car off in cash. So, so that took, and then it was all gravy. So I just I would never sell anymore. Just kept them for almost 10 years,
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. It was the ups and downs were definitely a roller coaster ride. A few times when right before COVID, when it really dipped, I was going to have to put some money in, because I was going to get a margin call, because I had all these puts that I had written, and it was getting close to the, $100, $200 strike price. So, but luckily it didn't, and everything turned out great. But as Elon said, I mean, the story could have been completely the opposite. He could have went under in 2018 with the Model 3, There
Do you
was
think that though? Do you think that they could? I think they could have raised capital anytime he wanted, and that he keeps that narrative going to let people know like it's a nicer story to believe in and be a part of. But I honestly think they could have raised capital many times more. But you think they could have gone under Demetri?
um, yeah, I think the same thing. Because he had friends, Sergey Brin and all these guys. He could have
Yeah,
easily gotten somebody to give him money. At that point, they were calling him Da Vinci and the next,
yeah,
Isaac Newton, kind of
yeah,
guy. So I think he could have raised money if he wanted to. And
yeah,
maybe he did use it as a narrative just to be humble and, you
yeah.
know,
That's my
but
guess.
I think he used that also as a way to get more out of the workforce too. I mean, because he was saying at that point that they were not going to raise any more capital. We need to kind of solve these problems on our own, and then you get kind of crazy solutions like the assembly line tent, which just kind of came out of nowhere. And I think, if push really came to shove, I do think he probably would have raised capital. But I think having that narrative in the middle of of kind of the storm, it kind of reminds me of that story of, I forget if it was the Spartans who burned all their boats so that they had no retreat. We have to go forward. We're not going to keep going to the capital markets to solve our problems. So they were able to kind of innovate and come up with creative solutions because they didn't want to just view the capital markets as another kind of mechanism to just kick the can down the road. So I think it was really effective in that regard.
Yeah,
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 they also, they made a few mistakes. They put that
Mhm.
conveyor belt assembly, to bring the parts to the different sections of the assembly area. And that didn't work out and they scrapped it, when he was sleeping on the floor of the
yeah,
assembly area. And then they did the tents. But, you know, like you said, I don't think they would have went under. I mean, there were too many. All the people that bought his cars were really enthusiastic and
mhm,
believed in the vision that he was always saying. We
yeah,
all bought it for various reasons, but we also liked the environmental aspect of it and everything else.
yeah. There was that one book that Ashley Vance had written about Elon, and I think it was in that book they described the handshake deal he had with Sergey and Larry Page about like Google taking them over at a certain price if they didn't make it. And that was like in 2013 or something, right? Right around that time when
Yeah,
they were starting to mass produce the Model S, and they were kind of on thin ice with their uh, revenues supporting the costs and such. And that was sort of a closer call, I think, than 2018. And they did raise capital a number of times from 2013 on, probably because they had to. But if there was a point where they couldn't raise capital, they did have some deal with Google, kind of a handshake deal, it seemed like.
And I've heard Kathy Wood speak a couple times saying, if they needed to issue new equity in 2018, that ARK would have gone like all in and helped them to fund that issue. So I do think there would have been no shortage of volunteers to step up if
Yeah,
they needed to do another equity issuance.
yeah. Fidelity, Bailey Gifford, he's got a lot of people on his side that
Yeah.
believers. But yeah, I remember in 2013, Dimitri, remember when they before we took our delivery, we were like chomping at the bit to get our deliveries. They had the first deliveries on the West Coast, and I think it was 2012, because I remember it was right around my first son's birthday when they had the first deliveries in June of 2012. And those first cars, we were reading every review possible on the Tesla Motor Club's forums, right? Like every once in a while, I get like a secondhand review. We wouldn't get firsthand, someone be like, yeah, I went over someone's house that had the car I drove, and they drove it, and they told me all about it. And we'd read that like liquid, like gold. It was like gold. Anything firsthand or secondhand experience, third-hand experience, we'd read about on the Tesla Motor Club's forums. And you got more and more of that as the summer went on, and there's more deliveries. And then Motor Trend had their Car of the Year award as a Tesla, remember? And that was
yeah,
like,
that was
wow, this,
huge.
yeah, to us, that like vindicated us. And we were like, yeah, we won. But then the stock hadn't come up yet. And we were like, what happened to the stock? Why isn't the stock going up? Like everyone knows it's the best car out there. And it took another several months until the stock kind of reacted, right?
Yeah, yeah. I remember when they did the cross country trip and they came to Soho and we went
That's right.
down and saw Elon. They had two cars that they drove cross country, and they
Yeah.
went to the Soho store and down in Manhattan, and they
Mhm.
invited a bunch of us down there because we were,
Early
reservation
owners.
holders.
Yeah.
So yeah, we went down there. Elon took one of the cars and his kids and went to Central Park, so we never got to see him. But
Yeah.
JB was there, JB
Met
Straubel,
JB. Yeah, I talked
and
to
we
him a
took
little
pictures
bit.
with him. And I
Yeah.
remember you asking him, are you going to be the successor to Elon when Elon
Yeah.
steps down?
I remember that. I remember saying like, I think you'd be the next successor to
Yeah,
Elon after he steps down. That was
exactly.
in
He was taken
2013.
aback.
Yeah.
It's like,
He kind of half joked like, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So,
funny.
but
Yeah.
it was good. There were a lot of believers there that saw, we saw the cars up close. And then I also went twice before we got delivery. Once in New Jersey, in Princeton, they had an
Test drive
alpha
event.
prototype or a beta prototype. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
the second one, we did a test drive.
Okay.
I think it was up somewhere in New York. And so we got to drive it. So it kept our juices going.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you test drove it, it was like, once you personally experienced that car for the first
Yeah.
time, it was like, and we had already these biases built. It succeeded our wildest expectations, just experiencing the test drive, and kept our conviction going to keep investing. Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, I'm trying to think of today. Is there any kind of like company? People are always asking, like, what's the next Tesla? What's the next? And I don't know. I mean, is there anything like you think about today that kind of reminds you of what those early days of Tesla were like?
No, not really. The humanoid and AI. I've always been interested in robotics and getting a robot to do things around the house and be your
Yeah.
eyes and ears and bring packages in from the outside the house or
Yeah.
mow your lawn and stuff. I mean, with the neural nets and everything that Elon's talking about, I mean, if you married the two, it's got great potential.
Hmm. Yeah. How many years out do you think that is before we start seeing them in some some early deliveries of those humanoids that are functional?
I
Good
think we could be
guess.
only like 5 years out.
Wow. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's doesn't do much, it just to be there and understand, or like you're sitting on the couch and like it could go into the refrigerator and get you a beer or snack,
Yeah.
you know,
Something simple.
simple. And if it's like $10,000 or something, and it would
Your
help.
pet robot. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great for people that are disabled or
Yeah.
wheelchair bound, or can't get around it. It it would be a great asset to have something like that.
Yeah. And it'll get continuously better software updated to it pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
exactly. Just like the car. Yeah,
Yeah.
we used to tell people like, drive the car, and a lot of people didn't want to drive it. They were scared to drive it. But I
Yeah.
think if you drove the car, you would invest in the company. You
Yeah.
would understand what it's all about.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, there's those short sellers. There's tons of short sellers back then talking it down. And one thing we noticed was like none of them actually drove the car ever. They would
yeah,
just, talk smack about Tesla all day, every day, but they never actually would experience the product themselves.
yeah. I mean, even Jim Kramer, he never drove it. I
Yeah.
think he came on board when his daughter bought a car like two
Yeah.
or 3 years ago. Now he's on the Ford bandwagon.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Matt? What's your thoughts on Kramer and the
Yeah,
recent comments getting on Ford's bandwagon?
I, I have a hard time, trying to take it seriously. Yeah, I mean, he's done some good stuff. I think, getting Rob Maurer involved on the street, and he's actually had some, some pretty good in-depth interviews with Rob. It's pretty clear to me though that Kramer doesn't know nearly as much about the company as Rob does, or say we do. So he's never really been an Uber bull. I think he just kind of happened to have his wife and daughter try the car out just at the right time, right before the stock took off. Like
Yeah.
he got a little bit lucky in that regard from my perspective. And the skeptic in me thinks, okay, there's a lot of advertising dollars that the big auto companies
That's true.
spend on CNBC. So how much is that, impacting his, sudden love of Ford? So I don't know. I really do want all these companies to succeed, especially being here in Michigan. I've got a lot of family and friends that work in the industry. So I'm really hoping they can make the transition successfully. But there's no way I'm putting my own dollars into Ford or GM as an investment right now. I think the risk is really high. So it's more just I hope they make it, not that I think they will. So yeah, Kramer, I don't think he's really super informed of this. I mean, the guy covers hundreds of stocks all the time, so he doesn't really know any one of them in great detail.
Yeah, he's a complete, his job is to be a generalist on as many stocks as possible. Yeah.
And to be kind of a pumper, honestly, like his show's kind of crazy with like the sound effects. He's like a radio DJ, just like with all like pushing buttons for fart noises or whatever. He's like, oh, bye. It's like,
bye. I remember when that show first came out. I was working at UBS Investment Bank on the trading floor, and all the traders. I worked with supporting the traders. And I remember all the traders who that's who you wanted to be, but they were all so fascinated by Jim Cramer's Mad Money when that show first came out, because he'd talk up a stock and the next day they'd have institutional buyers trying to buy these stocks. Like every stock he talked up had a real effect early on. I don't think that's the case anymore, but early on it was like a really crazy anomaly. It was just a magic show or something. It was weird. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, this was probably like 7-8 years ago. I was watching that show. I never really watch it very often, but I was like, oh, maybe he's right. So he was like, I think he was pumping Under Armour that day. So I bought a couple shares of Under Armour, and it went down 10% over the next week. And I was like, all right, I think I'm done trusting this guy. I'll do my own research from now on.
It's funny. One of the I think the original idea of buying the Tesla Leaps, Demetri, that we came up with was from an old Motley Fool article back in 2011 or 2012 that we both came across, and we talked about it, and we thought, oh, that's the great way to get into this thing, Tesla Leaps. And years later, Motley Fool had a relationship with Interact. I worked on a relationship with the Motley Fool to build their wealth management business using Interactive Brokers as a custodian. And that's public information. So, but they have a wealth management business as an RIA, and they use Interactive Brokers as a custodian. I kind of had made that work, and the people I worked with at the Motley Fool, I remember 2013, 2014, this was after Tesla had that initial pop, and maybe when it was sort of becoming much more of a serious relationship, I would go down to their headquarters in Virginia, and one of the senior guys I was working with, on that team, he's like, we have lunches together, we got to know each other well, and he knew I was doing really so gung-ho in Tesla and did really well with the Tesla Leaps, and he's like, I wrote that article. He's the one who wrote the actual article on Tesla Leaps, but he didn't follow his own advice. If he had followed his own advice, he'd be so wealthy by now. But it's funny. It's such a small world. I actually got to know that guy really well who wrote that article, and he got to see me bear the fruits many times over of his initial idea.
Did you thank him?
Yeah, I did. I thanked them. I made sure to service them extra well and make sure things were I went to Mr. Petterfee on every, they have they're an incredible firm though. And, they've done a lot of good stuff for the industry, and their business has grown well and such. So yeah, I always had a special place in my heart for that big client that I kind of, was in charge of, and made sure that they were as happy as possible. So yeah, it was cool.
Demetri, I'm kind of curious, understanding you were bullish back then, given everything that you were seeing on the technology front, but how did you decide on Leaps rather than just the straight equity? And had you made investments in call options before, and it was just something that was kind of in your investment repertoire, or was it, kind of unique to this situation?
No, the only options I was back in '87, right before the crash. I was going to buy some SPX puts, and that's about the only experience. I missed out. I didn't have the money in my bank account, and you needed to have the money in the bank account in order. And this was a couple of days before the big drop on Thursday and Friday, and then on Monday it completely crashed. It could have made $300,000 or $400,000. It would have changed my life back then.
Wow.
I was making 20 grand, 30 grand a year, and playing all these dollar stocks and buying fuel cell energy and Ballard Power and all these other companies that I thought fuel cells would be the future and some other things. And, because I was into technology, but that's the only experience I had in options. And I don't know how we ended up buying those leaps.
I remember
It
because
may have been Emmet's
yeah,
idea.
because we went. Well, it was. I've been showing clients, and every time there's like a new big feature in the Interactive Brokers tool set, the Thomas Petterfee would push it on the sales team because he was the head of sales, and we'd have their weekly sales meeting. He'd be like, "Everyone, talk about this new feature," and so we'd have to study it and make sure we could talk about it to the new institutional clients. And so one of the new features was like the Risk Navigator tool, this custom scenario thing within it. And I think I remember bringing you into my office next door, and I was looking at it together, like verifying, like, because I thought I was like crazy thinking about how much return we could get if we put the same amount of equity into these leaps and the price gets to $100 in a year or two, like we think it could from $25 or $30. We saw like the 10x or 50x return possibility, and we're like, wow, that's a great deal. Let's do it. And so we just saw that visualization, and people do that stuff in spreadsheets and stuff, but we were able to just do it on that tool right there with the graph and play around with the numbers easily. And I think that's sort of, you and I kind of thought it over. And, if it was just me by myself, I would have second guessed myself over and over. Like I'm missing something, but I think we kind of.
Yeah, I remember that, the Risk Navigator, you explaining it to me and showing me the various outcomes, because you could put in various scenarios. And buying 1,000 shares at $30 versus buying, 10, 20, 30 contracts for like the same or half the price, because they were so inexpensive, the options. Nobody thought that the stock would, double or triple in the near future.
Yeah.
And even the leaps, like now they're just priced, 10 times, 30 times what they were back then, So it made sense to spend 30,000 and buy 30 or 40 contracts versus buying 1,000 shares of the stock.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So for today, I mean, in today's EV space, you have like Lucid and Rivian coming up in the news a lot. I mean, Fisker's coming around again. Apparently, I haven't heard them in the news recently, but Lucid and Rivian, that's like 40 billion and 80 billion valuations. I mean, and then Polestar just announced its deal potentially with the SPAC at 20 billion valuation. Do you have any thoughts on these new EV players, Demetri? What do you think?
I think they're going to do well. Rivian should do well. And Lucid, they've got Saudi money, so they'll be able to hang in there. They'll sell the 500 cars or whatever they're going to do this year, and who knows how many they're going to do next year. But if they sell out of them and there's demand for them, and I'm sure the Saudis, they'll be able to ramp up production. But the Polestar, I drove in a Polestar. They came to the EV Club of Connecticut, the dealership in New York City.
Okay.
They brought a couple of the cars over, and they had the Google CarPlay system, brand new system that Google has made for cars, and it was really good. You can ask it questions, set the temperature, and do all kinds of things. They were traditional looking cars. They weren't as sleek and cool as a Tesla, but a couple of the people there, the club members, they were interested in it because I thought they were just regular looking car, had all the buttons and everything else.
Yeah.
Had a screen, but not really that big, but they liked it. So I said, there are people that just like the traditional looking kind of car. They don't want, so I don't know. I think they're going to do well, because I think it's just going to take over. The addressable market's going to expand for EVs. So there's plenty of room for everyone to take over. There was another lady in the club that bought the Audi.
The Audi e-tron.
E-tron, yeah, and she had problems. The battery leaked, And
Oh,
she
What?
brought it back, and she had it for like 6 or 8 months. They didn't know how to fix it.
oh my
They
gosh.
were going to change the battery out, but they didn't know how to do it and how to get the battery to the dealership and who was going to put it in. And she finally gave the car back. It took them like 8 or 9 months, and it was just undrivable.
Oh my gosh.
So, there's growing pains, even for
Yeah.
companies like, and also I went to, I got invited once by BMW to do had to sign a
Focus group, right?
focus group
I
down
remember
in
that.
Jersey, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had the i3 there, and then they had all these cars that they had built partially, prototypes. And they asked us, and they had a Model S there, and they asked us like 1,000 questions on the S, and like
Yeah.
from different angles, from sitting inside the car in the back. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? This and that. Why did you buy it? Why didn't you buy it? And that. It was all Tesla owners, and they paid us like $300 for like 4 hours, 5 hours worth of questions.
Interrogation.
Yeah, interrogation, and then it was, and we had even a talk at the end, and it was Germans there, German speaking with an accent. They were interviewing us, why we bought the cars and what do we like about them. Would you buy this particular model that you see here if we were to build it? So they were really trying hard, BMW, and that was years ago, and they still haven't come up with, they come up.
That was like 6 or 7 years ago, right? That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
5, 6, 7 years ago. Yeah.
And it's taken them this long to come out with a compelling, I don't know, they have the i4 now. They have all these hybrids, plug-in hybrids, but
yeah.
I don't know, the i4s, I guess, is coming out soon.
Yeah.
The one with the big kidney-shaped grill.
Wow, what is it with BMW and the grill? They just think it's like the grill looks like it wants to eat you, and like they're just going for more and more grill, even on an electric car. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense for aerodynamics and just I don't know. It's just like the Lexuses. I think they're ugly.
Yeah. So I think we think that the legacy OEMs have a much harder, way to adjust their whole business model between the dealer networks and servicing and changing their whole supplier network and how they build cars versus like the startup EVs seem to have a little bit more of a fighting chance. Like Polestar already has like a pretty serviceable car, it sounds like, as an EV for people. And so, yeah, it's interesting. The future, for the future, I mean, what do you think about the future of Tesla? And, what are you still own your shares, I assume. You retired a little bit before me, I think. How do you like retirement? And then what do you think about the future of Tesla?
Yeah, I love retirement. I recommend it to everyone. So, yeah, I haven't, retired and COVID came. I retired in the day before everyone was told to stay home,
Yeah.
from work. And, but COVID threw a monkey wrench into, I had to stay home for a whole year pretty much, but I got to trade a little bit and worked my, my account. That's what I was, my main goal was to trade around my account and make, X amount of dollars per year. That's why I was writing those covered calls and trying to buy some, some long-term calls when the time arrives, when we had big dips in the stock. But I think Tesla is going to do well. I think, it could go up another 5 times, possibly 10, if Elon keeps innovating, like, when we saw when we went to the Gigafactory opening.
Yeah.
Remember, we had met Dave. I met Dave for the first time.
Yeah.
You were friends with him.
Yeah.
And the engineers there, when they gave us a tour, they were like, we're going to have multiple lines here, and every line's going to be, we're going to iterate and make it better than the previous. So you just heard this common theme of constant innovation, not resting on your laurels, like IBM and Xerox and all these other companies.
Yeah.
and without having the bureaucracy, having Elon being able to cut through and make decisions and cut through the bureaucracy. If they keep innovating and they get the battery production where he's talking in the terawatts, and he makes the affordable car, the $25,000 car, I think the sky's the limit. I mean, I think it still has great potential.
I mean, I think also a lot of it's key. A lot of, Elon's obviously the key factor that, makes or breaks Tesla. I mean, all the employees are needed, obviously, but none of this would have been possible without Elon doing what he's done. Do you think he stays as involved as he has been in Tesla for years to come, or do you think they need to put like another package on the table for him, incentive package on the table for him, like they did a few years ago that everyone thought was crazy, but maybe another one like Tesla gets to 10 trillion, he gets even more share options or whatever. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what's in store. I mean, he's stepping away from the meetings and stuff, and I think he's not involved in the minutia as much as he's just making the higher level decisions. The design of the truck and the design of the cars and major innovations and full self-driving. I think he gets involved in that on that level and talks to the team leaders, Andre and all those other people. But he's definitely stepping away because he's down at SpaceX, down at Boca Chica most of the time, and he's really anxious to get that going and keep it going. So he's there constantly pushing. So, but I think Tesla will do well. I think he's got some good people, and as long as he can go in there and see the bottlenecks, like service is an issue, and it's always been kind of an issue, and once he becomes aware of it, he's sort of like, gets involved and tries to do something about it. So I think, but he's key in cutting through all the red tape, because these companies get so big and they become so bureaucratic, and there's politics involved and different levels of management. No one can make a decision without the other group, or
and committees and all this stuff.
And Elon just goes in there and says, no, we're going to do this, or we're going to go this way. And we want it done. It's like similar to what Petterfy does did at Interactive Brokers, and it's still doing, like, we want this thing done by X amount of days. We're going to put it out, even if it's not complete, we're going to fix it as we go along, but we're going to put it out. I think Elon does that for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And SpaceX, I see you got a SpaceX sweatshirt on there. You're a big fan of SpaceX, I assume. What do you think about SpaceX, I guess, going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I follow SpaceX. I watch all the videos every day on Tesla and the factory in Austin and in Berlin, and just interested in the construction of it and how it's progressing and everything else. But SpaceX, I follow just as much. They've got all these people that have live cams all day and the testing. I've always been a fan of the NASA and the space shuttle. I remember the landing on the moon in '69.
Wow.
I was 9 years old, but I remember watching that. But so I was always a fan of the space shuttle, and I'm into space, and it's just very fascinating to me, and the way they're innovating and pushing the envelope every single day. It's just
it's exciting.
And I got to invest in SpaceX because of Emmet.
That's right.
And hooked up with a couple of people.
Yeah, that was back when we had the hookup with Shares Post early on. That worked out early. It was good.
So hopefully, SpaceX and Starlink, the other day when he spoke, he's like, it's going to be trillions of dollars in revenue. Eventually, when he gets the.
It's funny though. I talked to people about that SpaceX thing, and even though I was so happy to get in, theoretically at the time we got in, I think it was the summer of 2020, July or August or something like that. If we had instead kept that money, and because I had to close out of Tesla options and Tesla shares at the time to pay for my SpaceX investment, But if I had kept that money in Tesla,
Yeah.
that was like $700 pre-split. It would be worth a lot more than the SpaceX investment's worth today. But I'm happy I got diversified and got SpaceX. But people are always like, "Oh, you're so lucky you got in SpaceX early." And I'm like, "No, I would have been luckier if I just kept it." Like from a monetary point of view, it would have been better just to keep it in Tesla and get into SpaceX now, even though SpaceX has doubled in valuation. Tesla's gone up 5x since then. But yeah, no, I'm not complaining. But some people think we got like some special deal that gave us exorbitant money that other people don't get an opportunity to get. But really, it's not as rosy as people think. But I'm still happy that I got SpaceX.
Yeah, I mean, it still has potential to
Oh yeah, it has
10
potential.
bagger, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think we're coming up on an hour here or so. Matt, do you have any other questions, or Demetri, anything else you want to bring up or anything about the future of Tesla or anything?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of know what your thoughts are. I mean, I've been trying to listen to the podcasts, but they're, it's a lot time consuming, even when you're not working.
Yeah, so many podcasts. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and even if you speed them up, it still
Yeah.
takes quite a bit of time. So,
Yeah.
I know you guys are pretty bullish, but like all of us, we're always looking. We're not looking at the next 3 months. You're looking at the next year, 2 years. So,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Tesla? In the next year, for instance, are we going to get the 2 million run rate by next year? Or?
What do you think, Matt?
I personally think we'll be a little shy of 2 million. I think we're going to see Austin and Berlin ramping up pretty quickly here. Maybe they'll get like the Q4 run rate might get to 2 million. That wouldn't surprise me. But I think for the actual deliveries for 2022, it's hard to say exactly what they'll be, but I kind of think it might be closer to like 1.5 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe 1.4 to 1.6, something like that in ramping. But really, it's so hard to even predict that because I don't know what the S curve at those two giant new plants is going to look like. So maybe it'll be 1.2 or something, and it just is harder than we thought. But yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes. And then 4680, I think that's going to be really key to see how that ramps. It sounds like they're having some issues getting that pilot line up and running, which that needs to be the precursor to actually getting large scale 4680 cells up and running, which is going to be key to the Cybertruck. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, but it's very hard. I think Elon has talked about this a lot, where if you want to make projections for a full calendar year, like a 10% shift in the time frame of a ramp one way or another can have pretty drastic impacts on your full year numbers. So I think the trend is what I'm going to be watching more closely than the actual numbers. But even still, I'm just as a someone who likes to do the financial modeling, even at the low end of what I think is going to happen, I think it's still going to be a great year for the company. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, I think going into 2023 will be very exciting too. They'll be at like maybe 2.5 million vehicles 2023. I would estimate, if I had to right now, with chips shortages being done, hopefully by then too.
So where do you guys think the next plant is going to be? They're going to start the next plant sometime next year? India or?
Yeah, I
East
mean,
Coast or?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's East Coast, UK, somewhere else in Europe, maybe, or possibly a second plant in China for the next Model Q or Model 2 or whatever they call it. Possibly another plant in China for that. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, man?
Yeah, it could be China. I mean, Europe. It's so hard to tell right now because you've got Shanghai exporting a lot to Europe, and you've got U.S. demand is not really being satisfied out of Fremont alone now. But you don't know what the kind of full when production's up and running in both Berlin and Austin, that's presumably going to be enough for those domestic markets, but it might not be. So to me, the thing, if I had to guess, I would say maybe another plant in China. Because I could see domestic Chinese demand for the $25,000 version, being a lot higher than it is for the current Model 3, Model Y at those price points. So I would put my money on that, but I would say with a low degree of confidence.
Yeah, and they can export those very profitably to other places early on from China too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. If the domestic demand just isn't there for whatever reason, I think the margins on those will still be great, even when you account for transportation costs and all that. But I don't know. Maybe there does seem to be rising political risk with investing in China, so maybe that's a mark against that. It's really hard to say, but for right now, I'm just excited to watch Berlin and Austin ramp.
Yeah. Well, Demetri, it's been fun chatting with you, and
Yeah.
I look forward to staying in touch with you anyway, offline and such. So, yeah, maybe we'll see how our predictions come through, and maybe we'll have you on at some point in the future and chat again about where Tesla's going from there.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you for having me. Nice
Yeah.
meeting you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Demetri. Great to meet you.
Thank you.